the all-powerful God hypothesis can't explain the terrible suffering we find, but traditional atheism can't explain fine-tuning and certain other things to do with consciousness that are a bit trickier. The God of limited powers hypothesis, I think, can explain all the data. There is an important moral difference between a God who's made this universe but could have made intelligent life without all the pain of natural selection, and a God who, that was their only option. It was this or no intelligent life, right? My conception of Christianity is there's a God who wants to create a perfect universe, but the only way they're able to do it, sort of do it in two stages.
Often one of the reasons for postulating God in philosophy of religion is that it's an ultimate explanation, some kind of necessary being that postulates or that ontologically supports everything contingent in the world, right? And that's because it's necessary, because it's all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-good. Now, you say that we should have a God of limited power so we can understand the problem of evil, that maybe God wasn't able to stop this. Can God, or can a God of limited power, explain the existence of the universe? Or is this something which you're agnostic on, or which is maybe lacking from the more general picture you have?
So that is the view I've ended up with. The best hypothesis here is a God of limited ability, a God who's not all-powerful. So I think the all-powerful God hypothesis can't explain the terrible suffering we find looking at our TV screens every day. But traditional atheism can't explain fine-tuning and certain other things to do with consciousness that are a bit trickier to explain. But I think that the God of limited powers hypothesis, I think, can explain all the data, right? So we can explain the fine-tuning in terms of God's purposes for the universe, God wanting a universe compatible with the possibility of life. We can explain the suffering we find in terms of God's limitations. So that the hypothesis would be that God simply can't create intelligent life, complex intelligent life, by clicking God's fingers. If God has fingers, the only way God can create intelligent life is by creating a universe with the right kind of physics that will eventually evolve it. And God's like, I know it's going to be messy, it's going to be horrible, I'm sorry. It was this or nothing. It was the best I could do, guys. So yeah, I think that's I think it's really, that is, to my mind, the hypothesis that supported by, that is where the evidence is pointing as we currently have it. Sounds a bit weird. Again, it sounds a bit weird, but it does the job, I think.
Yeah, I have a question, or perhaps criticism, about your solution to the problem of evil with the God of limited power. I'm not sure it 100% deals with the issue, but just before we get onto that, I just want to stick on the point of God serving as the explanatory or ontological foundation of the universe. Now, a God of limited power doesn't seem to quite fit this picture of a necessary being which sits under everything in the same way, right? You would expect that something which is the ontological substratum of the universe, right, would be ultimately powerful. How can we make sense of a God with limited power? How can we conceptualize of a God that's of limited power and yet explains everything, right? There must be something that sits under it, or something along those lines, right?
Yeah, it's a good question. The distinguished Christian philosopher Richard Swinburne, as we had a debate on the Unbelievable YouTube channel. He's pressing something like these concerns to me. I mean, I suppose I would say God is still a necessary being, is still the ultimate foundation of everything that is and was and will be. So why can't a necessary being have limited power? I mean, I'm not thinking there's something outside of God that's limiting God. It's just God is the ultimate. It's just that, as Wittgenstein says, explanations have to stop somewhere. You've got to stop somewhere with your fundamental story of reality. In my mind, that would just be the fundamental fact that God is limited in what God is able to do. I mean, maybe the all-powerful God hypothesis is a little bit simpler, and so a little bit, there's a little bit less of a why question there, maybe. But you never entirely get rid of the why question. Even with the all-powerful traditional God, you've still got the question, well, why? Why does it exist? Why isn't there nothing? So you've always got to take something as brute as the foundation. So I don't see why I can't take a God who's not all-powerful as the foundation.
Yeah, it's true. I guess I do ultimately agree that when I was younger and I was doing philosophy of religion for the first time, I found the necessary existence thing maybe a little unsatisfying as an ultimate explanation, which I think is what I was looking for at the time, right? The idea that there'll be a point where we go, oh, okay, that's it, right? But obviously, there's got to be some explanatory bedrock. But to move it to the problem of evil, if that's all right with you in specific, your essential criticism of the all-powerful, all-knowing, all-loving God is that they could have created a universe where we didn't need to go through this messy process with immense amounts of suffering in order to get the kind of complex consciousness and connection with God that we have today. And so therefore, the kind of value of free will and so on and so forth doesn't really counterbalance all the suffering that we have, all the natural suffering and so on. However, for me, there's still a problem in that the God of limited power, assuming that God, had a decent foreknowledge of what was going to come about and how this process was going to go, right? Still knew the kinds of suffering, the genocides throughout history and currently, the immense animalistic suffering on an everyday scale, murder, etc., and so on, and still chose to put people through that simply so we could come closer to God in some way or feel united to God in some way. I don't know if from the perspective of the person who's suffering immensely, starving, has experienced sexual assault, has been murdered, has had a child killed, that this connection with a being justifies all that.
Yeah, very nicely put. These are very challenging questions. I suppose I would say there is an important moral difference between a God who's made this universe but could have made intelligent life without all the pain of natural selection, let's say, could have made intelligent life without hurricanes and natural disasters, and a God who, that was their only option. It was this or no intelligent life, right? And I suppose with the latter question, thinking of the God I believe in of limited power, I think, yes, life is horrible. There's all sorts of suffering, but still, I think a case can be made that it's still on balance better that we have life than that we don't. I think that sounds quite plausible to me. It's not totally sure of that, but it's still, it's if you had the choice, we can ask the question. We have I've forgotten the word. We have antinatalists who think, it's not worth it and it's immoral to have children. We should let the human race die out. But I think most of us would think, if you're going to choose between total annihilation and letting things carry on as they are, the latter is better. So I think it sounds plausible to me that the God of limited powers was making the good choice. If that was their only option, if it was life or no life, if it was life as we have it or no life, then it was the right moral choice to go for life. Whereas a God who could get life with much less pain, I find it much harder to make sense of that as a sensible, correct moral choice.
Okay, to maybe move it on now to your Christianity specifically, Philip. I'm curious why Christianity, because just based on my own understanding of my experience with speaking with Christians, Protestants, Catholics, it's interesting that you marry a God that is limited with a religion that fundamentally believes in God as the highest, all-powerful being, a God that can do basically anything. I'm curious why Christianity and what motivated you to go for that religion rather than, it almost makes more sense to me for you to have started your own religion.
That's something I'm not going to do. Yeah, I don't like power enough. I like people disagreeing with me too much. Not entirely without ego, but not really much of a craving for power. Anyway, I don't think I'd be a very good cult leader. Yeah, well, I mean, for a long time, I thought Christianity wasn't an option because I thought, it was an all-powerful God. And because I thought, like I think many people think, that the core of Christianity involves this idea that's known as penal substitution, that it's all about Jesus paying the price for our sins. So, we're all sinners. We deserve to burn in hell forever. But Jesus kindly took the flack for us, took the punishment for us, and now we can go to heaven. And I mean, I've got respect for friends and colleagues who defend that view, but personally, I find that one of the most implausible philosophical or theological views ever defended. I mean, we could talk about that if you like. So I just thought that was Christianity. So I thought, there's no way I'm a Christian because I just find that too implausible. But actually, it's just from wide reading and many conversations with many different kinds of Christian thinkers that I actually found that's not even the official view, right? That's one theory of the mechanics of Christian salvation associated with the Protestant Reformation, really, but something similar was defended by Anselm in the 11th century. But actually, there are many, many different, even with very traditional non-heretical Christianity, many ways of understanding what it's all about. And in particular, what I became attracted to is the way of understanding that's found more in the Eastern Church, the Eastern Orthodox Church, where there's much more of a focus on it being about God and us and the universe coming together into a state of deep intimacy. So there's less of a focus on sin in the Eastern Church. There's more of a focus on what the Jesus stuff was all about, was God and the universe coming into an intimate connection. Perhaps what there's this bit where in the Gospels where Jesus is talking about this metaphor of the vine and the branches, right? If you think, the vine and the branches, there's a deep, intimate, organic connection between the vine and its branches. So for the Eastern Orthodox Church, the point, that's the ultimate goal of creation, is for God and the universe to come into this deep, intimate, organic connection, like the connection between a vine and its branches. But the thought is there's a problem, right? And the problem is we're a bit different to God, right? Don't know about you two, but I am anyway.
Speak for yourself. Yeah.
God's, timeless, immaterial, ultimate source of all of existence, whereas we're just kind of temporal, embodied, contingent beings. So they're kind of too different. They're not like the vine and the branch. They're too different to come into this intimate unity. So then the thought is, well, the solution was God becoming a bit more similar to us, right? God taking on a physical nature, sharing in our form of existence so that we can share in God's form of existence, and that this somehow closes the gap between God and creation. So this is not normally defended with a God of limited powers, although there are forms of Christianity that go for a God of limited powers. But it just struck me at some point in conversations with people who like this view that I think it fits really well with a God of limited powers. So just to finish off, I guess my conception of Christianity is there's a God who wants to create a perfect universe, but the only way they're able to do it is to sort of do it in two stages. first create a kind of okay universe with the right physics that's going to evolve life in that messy process. And then in the second stage, as life becomes evolved enough, God begins to bring the universe to perfection by becoming more intimately involved with it, closing the gap between God and creation. A long-winded process that's perhaps still in motion, long way to go. But so I suppose it struck me that this particular form of Christianity fits quite well with a God of limited powers, which is what I think is a very well supported hypothesis. So it was that clash that first got me thinking of it. But I just very, very finally I just want to add, I'm very uncertain whether it's true, right? I've just made a kind of bold argument for a God of limited powers. I really think there's a good case for that. But as for Christianity, I'm much less certain. I suppose I've come to think it's a credible possibility because I think it fits well with the God of limited powers, which I think is well supported. So I'm very, very far from certain. I think it could be true, it could be false, but I also think faith is not about certainty. I think faith is about trust more than belief. It's about trusting a certain view of the meaning of existence, trusting it to shape your fundamental life goals and guide you in how you interpret your fundamental experiences. It's more a sort of living in hope of something rather than certainty. And yeah, that's where I've ended up. That was my most long-winded answer yet. I'm sorry for that, but go for it.
Thank you.
The detail is necessary.
Panpsychism is the view that consciousness goes all the way down to the basic building blocks of reality. The consciousness of a sheep is simpler than the consciousness of a human being. The consciousness of a snail is simpler still. And as we move to simpler and simpler forms of life, we find simpler and simpler forms of conscious experience.
How can we conceptualize of a God that's of limited power and yet explains everything?
Traditional theism struggles with reconciling the terrible suffering we find in the world with an all-powerful, loving God.
Philip Goff, you don't believe in hell. So what happens when we die? Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that clip from our interview with Philip Goff. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Leave your comments down below too. If you'd like to check out the full-length interview, you can click right here. Thanks for watching once again, and see you next time.